Donald Trump has been changing the notions of conservatism since his first presidential campaign, and generally not in great ways. Expanding budget deficits and executive power, tariffs, and foreign isolationism are not the principles of conservatism that have built the United States into the greatest nation the world has ever seen. If we want to conserve American exceptionalism, opportunity, and global hegemony, conservatives cannot get sucked into the consistent trend of expanding federal power. As someone who's been following politics for over a decade, while also only following politics for just over a decade, I haven't liked to see the turn in conservatism from small government Tea Party-esque principles to MAGA populism. I may only be 27, but I've been around long enough to understand the right's justifiable outrage over Barack Obama's vast expansions of executive power, essentially legislating via executive order. As he said,
I'm going to be working with Congress where I can to accomplish this. But I'm also going to act on my own if Congress is deadlocked. I've got a pen to take executive actions where Congress won't, and I've got a telephone to rally folks around the country.
But then conservatives did something totally unexpected by electing Donald Trump. That includes me. I voted for him in 2016 as well. And maybe at the time, that was the right move. But Donald Trump is not exactly conservative. I mean, he was a New York Democrat until he decided to run for office. And let's be totally honest, he's not exactly someone I would call politically principled. Just look at how many times he's flip-flopped positions from one day to the next. But to committed members of the MAGA movement, he's their guy. And it seems to them that they believe nobody else on earth could be doing the things that he's doing. The real problem is the direction Trump is pulling the broader conservative movement towards. Some say the movement towards Trump populism has been beneficial because it's brought people over from the left into the Republican tent. But I would argue that the Democrats' rapid shift left has done more to push these people to the Republican Party than Trump himself. From his obvious desire to win and put his name on everything, he's either changed or is trying to change the way the executive branch operates. And that doesn't mean that everything he's done is bad, for sure. But conservatives should want him to remove power from the executive, not just wield the same, if not more, power just because he's doing it in conservative-friendly ways. Doing so just leaves the door open for Democrat administrations to turn around and act in their own interests, and Republicans will have no ground to stand on by which to object. If we want to embody the John Locke small government individualism of our founding that we claim to conserve, and push back against the left's aggressive wielding of government authority without looking like complete hypocrites, we cannot be playing the same game as them. Executive power has fluctuated over the past century, and you can't judge it solely on how many executive orders a president signs, but you can tell a bit based on the size and scope of their impact. There have been movements of executive expansion throughout our history, lasting examples being FDR's New Deal and LBJ's Great Society, but these are mainly bureaucratic program expansions. The main change in the 21st century has been the use and control of executive agencies to achieve political goals. The first instance that immediately comes to mind is the Patriot Act following 9/11. While it wasn't specifically partisan, it gave executive agencies a much greater reach for government surveillance and intelligence gathering, and likely led to Obama's NSA PRISM scandal for spying on U.S. citizens. We also have Bush and Obama using TARP funds to bail out large financial institutions and auto manufacturers, Obamacare as a whole, Biden's unconstitutional student loan relief, Trump trying to exert influence over the Fed and implement tariffs. All of these are big steps towards taking more and more control over people's lives. Excluding the ACA and Patriot Act, it's without any actual legislation, and Congress has done nothing to stop it. I thought we were the party of small government and fiscal responsibility, free trade and free speech. But after FCC had Brendan Carr win on a public platform and implied that if ABC didn't do something about Jimmy Kimmel, then the FCC might have to, I'm not even sure about the latter. This relates directly to the constant whataboutism seen in online and broadcast discourse. We recently found out that the Biden administration was actively working with YouTube to silence opposing views, and in the wake of Jimmy Kimmel's very brief suspension, for which liberal outrage was rampant, conservatives were right to point out the lack of outrage over blatant mass censorship. But you can't have the FCC threaten to pull Kimmel and then complain about YouTube censorship. That's not how intellectual consistency works, and in order to be effective in calling out the other side for their unconstitutional censorship, you can't cover for it yourself. The danger does not only lie in expanding executive power, but also in the increased use of federal agencies for specifically partisan purposes and against political opponents. Obama's IRS targeted conservatives, and his intelligence community selectively reported findings to imply Russian collusion with the Trump campaign, and by most legal opinions he falsely cited executive privilege to cover up the ATF gun-walking scandal Operation Fast and Furious. Biden used OSHA to force 80 million Americans to get the COVID vaccine, unconstitutionally forgave student debt, and sued Texas for enforcing their own border. Trump is threatening university funding based on what some student activists say, activating the National Guard to blue cities, and is firing Fed officials because they won't lower interest rates to the level he wants. It all seems like we're moving to a cycle where each time the Oval Office flips, there will be a sense of needed retribution for the transgressions of the previous administration. And that's a dangerous thing. It adds to the mentality that it's us versus them, furthers the divide, and lessens the likelihood of reconciliation and understanding. As much as I hate to say it, we might just have to be the bigger people here. To an extent, obviously, we can't allow ourselves to be taken advantage of, but also can't fight fire with fire by over-federalizing everything and expecting the left-right divide to get any better. The easiest way to stop people from getting so worked up over politics is to simply take power away from Washington. I would love to see federal elections become almost irrelevant to the lives of most people. I think society would be better off for it. But I don't think that will happen anytime soon based on the rhetoric coming from even red ties in DC. Conservatives, for as long as I've been around, have always talked about reducing the size and scope of the federal government, letting people decide what they want at the state or local level, and always saying that we just want to be left alone and live our life in the manner that we want. So why aren't those words ever lived out with the actions our supposed representatives take on Capitol Hill? Well, it seems to me that once our guy is in office, all of those desires are replaced by the desire to implement our ideas nationally. We can't continue to complain about Democratic administrations expanding federal control and power, and then turn around and do the exact same thing. One thing I'd love to see conservatives do is stop accepting the executive order inflation. Like I said, while presidents haven't necessarily been signing more executive orders, the ones they're signing now are much more legislative than directive. Executive orders are supposed to clarify the implementation and enforcement of the law, not create new ones. We need to put more onus on Congress to actually create relevant laws, instead of acting like cheerleaders or protesters for whoever's in the Oval Office. That's kind of what they're there for. Make them do their jobs and return this legislative power to the branch that it's named for. Now, some people might mention DOGE as the latest conservative attempt to reduce the federal government, but in reality, DOGE did not do nearly as much as people had hoped. And that's not the fault of Elon Musk or DOGE workers. There just isn't that much they can do operating within the bounds of the executive agency. Most of the reason why the federal government has become so bloated cannot be fixed by firing a handful of workers and cutting things like USAID. It will have to come from restructuring entitlements and taxes, something that even many conservatives have trouble stomaching and conservative politicians see as political suicide. If conservatives are too scared to argue for what is necessary to avoid either going $100 trillion in debt or doubling taxes, then I guess the conservative movement will become only a cultural movement and not a political one. If we want to prevent the political arena from simply becoming an ever-ballooning left-wing populism versus right-wing populism, then conservatives need to be more vocal about the reduction of the federal government and do a better job holding our representatives accountable from straying from these ideals. Trust is an important component for any movement, and to achieve goals in the political realm, you need to show voters that you mean what you say. So to effectively advocate for these goals, we have to be self-disciplined enough not to engage in the very same behaviors we want to get rid of. I think it's very clear that there's been a serious cultural shift over the past few years. Conservatives can and should capitalize on the shift. But if we continue to shoot ourselves in the foot by reacting in hypocritical ways, we won't build a strong enough foundation to support the movement we seek to create. Thank you for watching. Let me know in the comments which direction you think our political parties will head going forward. If you enjoyed, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.